Hello, today we will be looking at the research method of survey research. So basically in surveys, we collect data from a group of people, either verbally or in a written form. And Isaac and Michael tell us why in the following quote. So we might do survey research to answer questions that have been raised, to solve problems that have been posed or observed, to assess needs and set goals, to determine whether or not specific objectives have been met, to establish baselines against which future comparisons can be made, to analyze trends across time, and generally to describe what exists, in what amount, and in what context. So now let's continue by looking at some of the strengths and weaknesses of survey research. First of all, it is relatively easy to do at a large scale, particularly if we have closed-ended written questions. We can reach a lot of people with minimal investment, and we can also measure attitudes that are hard to measure by observation. For example, if we are researching a group of very young learners, it will probably be better to observe them. However, if we are observing the engagement of adult learners, we can get much more detailed and interesting feedback by asking them questions directly. However, there are also limitations to this method, just like there are with any other method. First of all, it is only an estimate. For example, if we are trying to predict the outcome of an election in a country, we will have a small sample compared to the entire population, and particularly if our sampling methods are off, we could have very biased data in the end. It also does not give us any historical context. It only shows us the attitudes of people at a specific point in time, and it can also be biased. For example, people might be unable or unwilling to answer our questions, or we could have poorly worded questions. So let's look at the process. So we start with sample selection. It should be representative of the group we are trying to research. We should then choose the survey media. It can be verbal, written, or mixed. And then we should make sure that our questions are well developed and that they are good questions. For example, the wording is important. We should not have a question where the participants might want to answer one part positively and the other part negatively. For example, if we ask university students to agree or disagree with the following statement, the course content is at my level and relevant to me, they might want to agree with one part and disagree with another, so that would be a bad question. It is also important that they are able to answer the question and it does not cause them unnecessary stress. When we look at types of surveys, we have open-ended, closed-ended. It can be both ordered or unordered choices. For example, we might ask participants to respond on a scale from 1 to 5, or we could have simple multiple choice answers which are unordered. They could also be partially closed-ended. For example, we could have multiple choices, but then also allow for participants to add their own options. Now when it comes to survey execution, we start with getting permission from the participants. Then we can do a pilot study, particularly if it is a large survey. We always start with a pilot study. Also, sometimes the surveys might be trained if there are multiple surveyors. And then we can also have quality checks throughout the process. After that, we come to data analysis. Transparency is important, but we should only use aggregated data to protect privacy. Oftentimes when participants participate, they do not give us the right to reveal their identity. So for example, if we have done an open-ended interview type of survey, we can refer to the participants by participant number, like participant 1, participant 5, and of course in their quote we need to delete any names or identifying information so that people cannot understand who they are. And then we have to analyze the results. We can do thematic analysis if we have used open-ended questions, Or if we have done close-ended questions, then we often do analyze the results with statistics, and we use SPSS for this. Finally, here are my references.